Thanks so much for joining us on your Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jack Biss. I'm the founder of Call to Action, and I'm joined today by Maddie from NationBuilder, who's joining us, Brian Early from London. So today we're going to dig into what's actually working in digital fundraising right now and give you 5 practical things you can apply to your own end of financial year appeal. But before we start today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation on whose land we join you from today. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend our respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from all nations of this land. So first, I thought it might be helpful to tell you who we are. Call to Action are a marketing and fundraising agency based in Melbourne, driving results for both purpose-led brands and not-for-profits. And we blend digital marketing and fundraising best practice to deliver strategy, campaigns, and creative that make a difference. And if you've not heard of us before, you might rightly be wondering what qualifies us to talk about digital fundraising. So before starting Call to Action, I was fortunate enough to work with organisations from a really wide range of cause areas around the globe, including the likes of UNICEF, WWF, the Red Cross, Guide Dogs, and then closer to home, Salvos and Monash University. And then since starting Call to Action, we've completed fundraising strategy, campaigns, and digital marketing projects for amazing organisations, including Lifelight, Lock the Gate, and Assistance Dogs, among many others. And we also work with some amazing partners who provide the tools and systems that make digital best practice possible. And so given that, I will pass you over to Maddie from NationBuilder to talk a little bit about them.
Thanks, Jack. Yes, my name is Maddie, and I'm very, very pleased to be here with you all today. I've been at NationBuilder for over 4 years now, most recently leading our events and partnerships, and I'm based in London. For those of you who aren't aware, NationBuilder is the world's leading community building software used to engage your supporters and move them to meaningful action, providing communities with the digital infrastructure to organize their database of supporters, donors, members, volunteers, you name it, send out targeted communications, host action-oriented websites, and run fundraising efforts all under the one hood. And so over the last 15 years, we've worked with over 100,000 NGOs, charities, and movements in over 100 countries, which has really allowed us to apply key learnings to our product on how to best organize and lead your community towards change. So here's a peek at some of the organizations we've worked with across Australia and New Zealand, but also the wider APAC community, who have used our software to lead their communities and drive them to action. To give you an overview of what we'll be running through today, so we're going to start by talking about simplifying your meta campaign structures, why it's important to integrate across all channels. Thirdly, why lo-fi creative is outperforming polished content, what a best practice landing page looks like with some real case studies, and finally, how to make your checkout frictionless by looking at another couple of examples. We'll also have maybe 5-ish minutes at the end to answer your questions, so feel free to pop those in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer them once we've wrapped up. And I will pass you back to Jack to take you through the first half of our recommendations.
Perfect. Thanks, Maddie. But before we get into the recommendations, let's set the scene because I think a little bit of copium is needed here. And if you attended our last webinar, you will recognise Pingu. So 29% of Australian charities reported missing their fundraising targets last year. And we also know that giving to charity has declined at least 3% year on year, and total media spend at the same time has increased 11% year on year. So the ad space you're competing in is more crowded and more expensive than ever. So for some organisations, not all, this means you're raising less at a higher cost. And this is what it looks like in practice. So we've just pulled some ads from Meta and Google over last end of financial year. And as you already know, it's one of the biggest moments on the fundraising calendar. So lots of organisations in Australia in market at the same time. You've got wildlife charities, international aid, disability services, climate organisation, medical research, all competing for very similar audiences' attention and their wallets all at the same time. So we know that we need to stay on top of best practice in order to cut through and stand out in a really competitive market. And the good news is a lot of what is actually working right now in digital doesn't require massive budgets. It just requires smarter execution. So first off the bat, I imagine Meta will probably be your primary digital acquisition channel. Or if you're just starting your digital fundraising program, you're probably thinking about trialing Meta for your end of financial year appeal. But what's actually working right now? So Call to Action was set up to work with both commercial clients and nonprofits. As from our own experience, there's a lot each sector can learn from the other. So the insights we're about to share are also true from the commercial campaigns we run, often at a much larger scale. So if you were to look at a Meta ad account for a charity 2+ years ago, most organizations probably would have had their appeal structured like this. So the accepted wisdom was that you needed to create a waterfall funnel with different campaigns at each stage. So you might have a top of funnel campaign, a middle of funnel, and a bottom of funnel campaign. And often these campaigns would optimize for different events. For example, traffic or engagement at the top of funnel and conversions for the bottom and middle of funnel. And we'd often and still do see a lot of ad sets with different interest targeting. For example, you might have one targeting pets, parents, Sky News, Guardian readers, and my personal favorite, which I actually saw in a charity in the UK, neighbours and home and away watchers. The logic behind this granular targeting was to find the most efficient audience and then push budget into it, making your overall spend more efficient. But in reality, you're spreading your budget too thin across too many ad sets, and none of them get enough data to exit the learning phase, unless you're running a really large-scale campaign. And then you've often got the same creative running across all of them, so you're not really testing anything useful. And then we've got Meta's limitations on cause and health interest targeting, so that's also impacted this approach. So what's actually working right now? Since Meta's Andromeda update, the algorithm genuinely rewards simpler campaign structures with broader targeting. So we are seeing far better results optimizing all campaigns, even those cold prospecting campaigns, you might call them, for donation or purchase conversion. So we're not optimizing for traffic, not engagement. We're just optimizing for donations. And the campaign structure is simplified. So we have one prospecting campaign containing a warm audience ad set, and that will target your website viewers, your page engagers, the people who already know who you are. You might also have custom donor lists that you use. And then we have a broad cold interest audience based on your target audience persona. Often this will include the charity and causes interest, any specific interest relevant to your cause, and then a relevant age band. With lookalikes of donors also included, and you'd probably have Advantage Plus targeting turned on. So we only now create a separate ad set if there's a genuine reason or a difference in motivation to give, which means we need to tailor our messaging and the ask. So for example, in campaigns for clients such as assistance dogs and campaigns I've run in the past with guide dogs, we've split out pet owners who don't know the organisation, as they have a different motivation to give than someone who is connected to blindness or low vision as a cause. We then have retargeting split out into its own campaign, so we can manage that spend separately. And this retargets appeal page viewers who haven't given with urgency ads, and is often responsible for driving the lowest cost per acquisition. So essentially, this simplified structure consolidates your learnings into wonderful ad sets. And that means that you have more data per ad set, and Meta can optimize faster and more effectively. So if we're not splitting audiences out into lots of different ad sets, how do we actually target different people? And the answer is with creative. So we use themes and angles to target different audience pockets. Meta then uses these different pockets of uses these different themes and angles to find different pockets of people in that broad audience. So if you only had one of the angles, you'd be missing out on talking to those other pockets of people. So if we look at this campaign, for example, your Advantage Plus, your broad prospecting cold audience, might get 3 different messaging angles. You might have one angle that leads with stats and facts about your need and your impact. You might have another angle that leads with a case study story, and then you might have another angle that's a bit more urgency, direct response focused. And then you'd use a mix of images and videos. Typically, they would be assets you already know work, or a similar style to the ones you've seen work in the past. And then let's say we're also targeting pet owners. So we need to create messaging angles that are more relevant to a pet owner's audience and potentially lead with the animal rather than the cause. So and then we have your warm audience. They get tailored copy that respects the fact they already know who you are. And then lastly, we have retargeting, and retargeting gets short, sharp hooks. So you've already shown them the need. Now you're just pushing for the conversion. So again, we're letting the creative do the granular targeting work whilst consolidating more data in one ad set, which helps Meta optimize more effectively. But what if you don't know what images or videos work, or you want to keep testing, or it's your very first appeal? So there's two different approaches that we're using. The first is using what we call Meta's flexible ad format. So we typically use this when we already know what images and videos perform well. So we load in our best assets and then we test different messaging angles and text variations. So Meta then mixes and matches those to find the best combination. And the example on screen is actually from one of our commercial clients. And here we're testing a testimonial social proof-led angle. And you can see a variety of images and a video in the ad on the left under ad creative. And we already know that those styles and that format are effective because we've tested them before. And then we have the standard ad formats. This is probably what you're most used to seeing. And we use this when you're testing specific visual assets against each other. So for example, you want to figure out what image works best, what video drives a higher link click-through rate. That standard format gives you that granular control and clear data on individual asset performance. So in the example here from one of our charity partners, you can see we've used a different combination of angle and asset. So for example, we have a stats and fact video and a stats and fact static, then a case study branded, and then we've also got a non-branded case study. And from the structure, provided there's enough spend and data, we can get a really clear idea of what angle works best, does branded and non-branded perform best, and which image or video asset perform best. And that's our tips for simplifying Meta. If you do have any more questions on this, please use the Q&A feature and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. Now let's talk about integration. Before we talk about integration, I wanted to talk about what integration actually means, because it's one of those things that are words that everyone uses, but not everyone means the same thing. So at its core, integration starts with a shared objective. Every team and channel in your organization working towards the same North Star. From there, you build out a shared narrative. So what's that story that you're telling over your appeal period, and how is it being told across channels? Then your audience and your media plan, making sure you're reaching the right people in the right places at the right time. Your data and journeys, making sure that supporter experience is seamless as donors move between channels. So if someone's giving to a specific appeal with a specific proposition, the welcome and stewardship journey should then reflect that same proposition. And finally, budgets, targets, and KPIs. So you want everyone aligned on what success looks like, both brand and fundraising. And it's not just the same, so it's not just running the same ad on Facebook and Google, it's really strategic alignment from the top down. And I also wanted to talk about where Australians are spending their time and where we can reach them. So we know that Aussies are spending over 6 hours a day online, and this will be similar for anyone joining from New Zealand. And that's across TV, social media, streaming, gaming, podcasts, you name it. So the point here that we're trying to make is not everyone is on Meta. And we know that it can take multiple touch points with an individual to get cut through, which is really important when the market's so crowded. So if we're going to get those multiple touch points, then we should really be considering other forms of online video, video on demand, music streaming platforms, the places where our audiences are spending their time. Obviously, it will depend on your budget. And the organisations integrating across channels, like this old example I pulled from UNICEF here, are running their appeals across paid social, search, display, email, their website, direct mail, SMS, face-to-face, and often other above-the-line channels like out-of-home and DRTV. So simply put, integration is important because integrated campaigns raise more money and acquire more donors with single channel and team approaches. I unfortunately can't share the exact revenue numbers or ROI from a number of organizations. So we're going to use this graphic as the best way to illustrate the halo effect of integration. So the best way to think about it is you've got your current campaign structure, which is the blue at the bottom of this chart. Every individual revenue stream or new channel investment on top of that adds to it. And when you then have multiple channels, creative and teams all pulling together, you get an additional uplift from integration, often referred to as the halo effect. Essentially, what we're saying is you'll see far better results from a truly integrated campaign compared to an appeal that's running, direct mail, paid social, and search, and maybe other channels in isolation, and they're not talking to one another. But what does that actually look like in practice? Example on screen, it's probably a lot to take in. Is so an example for a larger organization over end of financial year with an above the line budget. So in this case, they're likely looking to raise hundreds of thousands or millions over end of financial year. So let's talk through what we've got. We've got own channels, website, EDM, direct mail, organic social. They're running from late April. We've got 2 DM waves. Paid channels like TV, radio, out of home, video on demand, they kick in from the appeal launch with brand response creative and then pivot to more urgent direct donation asks in June. And then we have paid social and search running donation asks the entire time. Obviously, the theming of messaging and creative will be updated throughout. We're also using PR, so 3 clear moments, the appeal launch for this charity, research release, and then a matched giving sprint. And then your shared channels, corporate partners and community layer in from mid-campaign. So this is where those other teams come in and why it's really important that everyone's working towards the same North Star. And by planning in this way, you can ensure that all of your messaging is aligned across channels, so you know what's going out when. You're upweighting budget when it makes sense to do so. So in this case, probably around those key PR releases and then into June when the bulk of the income is going to come in. And you're reaching your audience via multiple touch points, which helps get cut through, which helps improve response. I will come to what if your budget isn't that big in a second. But first, just wanted to talk about not putting all of your eggs in the Meta basket when it comes to digital. Again, it's budget dependent, but truly integrated campaigns running across paid social, paid search, Google Ad Grant, Google Demand Gen, or Performance Max will drive a better result than just running Meta as your primary digital channel. And we're actually seeing comparable, if not better results compared to Meta when Performance Max and Demand Gen campaigns are structured right. So in Demand Gen, we're able to repurpose existing social assets to serve visual ads across YouTube, Gmail, and Google Discover. And then Performance Max is another Google channel. It runs across multiple channels and requires specific creative. And the example on the right that we've got on screen, those are some real numbers from one of our commercial clients. So we started them on Performance Max early last year, hence the relatively low spend. And with the right structure and the right content in place, it's been really, really effective. So it's smash target for them with 10 times the total revenue target and a return on ad spend of 13, which is pretty hard to beat. And that's predominantly cold prospecting for them. But what if your budget is smaller? The answer is you just need to maximize the channels that you've got. So you've still got your website, you're still going to have EDMs, you probably will have direct mail and organic social, and they'll really be your foundation of the appeal. And then paid social and paid search probably kick in from appeal launch. The reason we use those 2 channels is because out of all of the other ones I've mentioned, they're probably the best for lower budget in terms of driving conversions. You can also use PR because PR is free, as long as you've got the team to put it in place. And then your shared channels layer in where they can. And I know this may trigger some people here, as I'm very aware that the battle for a homepage banner or squeezing a social post in the calendar, I don't know what that looks like. But if someone lands on your website during end of financial year or your Instagram page, the first thing they see should be your appeal. So there's a great example from Penny Appeal on the right. When you land on the website, you cannot miss the appeal, and it takes up a considerable part of the homepage, and that's really what you want throughout May and June. So now we're going to move on to lo-fi digital creative, and this one's my favorite. It's great news if you're working with a tight budget. So short, authentic content is winning in digital right now. So we're talking short, organic style reels, behind the scenes and follow my day type of content, as well as direct asks from staff on camera, lo-fi case study videos clipped together with trending reel style captions. None of the videos that are on screen require big production budgets. The content that feels real, feels human, feels unpolished is getting engagement and driving conversion. So with those examples on the right, you can the one on the top left, top right, and bottom right are ours, and then I've pinched one from Red Cross because I really like it. So you can see a direct up to camera ask from a hospice nurse on the right. That was literally filmed by them in their hospice in the UK and then sent to us to clip together. No fancy music or edit cuts. We've also got a deliberately lo-fi case study video we adapted from a longer form 3-minute story on the bottom. And then again, we've got that great example from the Red Cross showing their impact on the ground, which is literally just a staff member talking to their phone. We're also seeing more basic organic style design outperform branded variations. And this has really taken a big swing in, I'd say, probably the last 6 months. So if you think about your direct mail, you might often get complaints that the paper you're using is too glossy or it's too thick. this is the digital version of that. So some people like to think the organic look means the charity is being tight on budgets, or at least that's our fault. But I wanted to run through a few examples. So I'm going to pick on Havens Hospices. They're one of our UK partners as we develop their fund and nurse appeal, and they've been really amazing to work with. So they've trusted us to run best practice from the get-go and been willing to accept some slightly weird or honestly average looking designs. On the left, you can see 2 carousel ads for a case study. Exactly the same content. The only difference is the design style and the caption font. And that more organic looking one at the top drove a link click-through rate 2.3 times higher than the branded version. And that is literally the only difference, is it looks a bit more average. And then in the middle here, we've got a few examples of other top performers from this appeal. So sometimes the basic images or photos with no graphics or text are working. And the image at the top here with the bed and the real style caption text, that is actually achieving the best cost per acquisition in the campaign. And in general, this style is outperforming these more branded variations on the right. And in some cases, we're deliberately making these assets look like they've been done fast and on the cheap, and it really works. I wouldn't say do this for absolutely everything in your campaign, but it's certainly something you should be testing. And lastly, on creative, we should always remember that people give to people, especially in the age of AI. So the more human and authentic your creative feels, the better it performs. If your team is spending weeks polishing assets, or your agency is spending weeks polishing assets for paid social, it's probably worth rethinking that approach. A phone can do most, and a designer and a video editor can do most of what you need these days pretty quickly. So moving on to the appeal landing page. So this is a step between the ad and the checkout, and it's where a lot of organizations leave money on the table. So we wanted to deconstruct what an ideal landing page looks like. So your ads and your landing page have got 2 different jobs. The jobs of your ads is to pique enough interest to get someone to click through. And that's it, really. Your appeal landing page needs to do the heavy lifting from here. And if you're not using a best practice landing page for your appeal, it won't matter how good your click-through rate is, you're paying to drive traffic to a page that doesn't convert, which means you're letting a lot of generous fish through your fundraising net. So again, we're going to use a few examples from Havens, from the fund and nurse appeal, which is a direct to cash ask, if you're wondering. So in the ad creative on the left, our first objective there is really, we just want to stop the scroll. And that's where that really basic image of a bed and the real style caption text, that's piquing people's curiosity. And that's why this ad is the best performer. And then we look at the ad copy. So in Havens' case, we're more testing the image assets, and we use the same copy across pretty much like most of the same cold audience assets. So we know that the image is the key differentiator. With ad copy, we always want to show the itch and the scratch. So what's the need, what's the solution, and then make the ask. And you typically want to test longer versus shorter versions of copy to see what works best. And lastly, don't forget the headline. So you should make it really clear what you're asking donors to do. We've tested loads of conceptual headlines in the past. None of them work. Just saying fund a hospice nurse, or £32 in this case could pay for an hour of care, is going to be far more effective than trying to make it really tied in with the proposition. And you want all 3 of these elements working together to drive up your click-through rate. So you've got to make sure that all the assets make sense when they're put together, because you could be testing loads of different combinations. And then once we've got people to the page, we want the donor to feel like they're arrived at the right place. So it's really important to have a value proposition at the top of the page that aligns with the ad creative. So this example here, you can see we're asking people to fund a hospice nurse. The top of the page, landing page, will you help fund our hospice nurse? And then we've got a very short case for support under that. And this page is currently converting 9.4% of all sessions to donors. And the best landing pages typically follow this format they're about to talk through. So for a header section, what do we have in it? We have a short value proposition that aligns with the ad copy at the top. And we typically accompany that with what we call a short form case for support, which essentially outlines your immediate need, how your organization is meeting that need, and the impact a donor can have. So it's kind of similar to what you would have had in your ad copy. And then once the donor knows they're in the right place, we want to make it really easy to give with an embedded checkout. We've also found that dollar handles, so having that description of what the money will be used for, can increase conversion rate. Essentially we're using them to sell units of impact. By matching 32 dollars or pounds to 1 hour of care, we've transformed what could be a cold financial transaction to something really tangible and emotional. And donor knows what they're getting with that dollar. But even with a great offer, people can often be hesitant to be the first ones to act. And that's why we feature social proof nice and high up on the page. You can do this in loads of different ways, but we love a scrolling banner. So seeing a rolling feed of recent donors tells them that this is a live, trusted, urgent community effort, and it provides the safety and numbers needed to move that person from, oh, I might consider doing that nice thing, to actually committing to do it. And now I will stop talking for a minute and I will pass you over to Maddie to talk through the rest of this.
Thanks, Jack. And now for the donors who need a bit more of a push before hitting confirm, you can provide a clear case for support. This is where, you outline the need, how you meet that need, the impact of giving, why it's urgent, and you make the clear ask. Think of it as the written version of your best fundraising pitch. From there, you can move from the abstract to the heart with a short case study, like you can see from the Hepatitis Australia example. So by putting a human face to the funding, you turn a policy or a program into a person, making the impact of their gift impossible to ignore. And like Jack said, people give to people, especially in the age of AI. To continue, you'll then want to tell donors exactly how their money will be used. You want it to be specific, tangible, emotionally resonant, and you might even want to include secondary donation asks that are scattered throughout the page rather than have just one single call to action feature at the top. And from there, you want to continue to explain a donor's impact with stats and facts. So if you've tapped into what might emotionally resonate with your audiences, it's important to back that up with numbers to really drive home your message. If they've scrolled this far and they still haven't given, they probably have questions or they need that final nudge. FAQs that address common donor concerns. So how is my donation used? Is my payment secure? Can I donate in memory of someone? Those answers can help reduce some of those final hesitations. And to wrap it up, you might want to add a final section with a call to action to learn more, as well as provide other ways to support. Because if for whatever reason they don't end up donating, you're at least giving them a sense of how else they could be supporting your movement, your campaign, and especially your end of fundraising year appeal. So considering pages now that are optimized for a donor mobile experience. So the majority of your traffic, like we've said so far, especially from paid social, is likely coming from mobile devices. So it's really important to ensure that you're giving your potential mobile donors a good experience, as well as those donating on their computer. So a few things for you to check before launching your page. Is your page fully responsive? Does the layout adjust smoothly when you change screen size? Does the content stack correctly? If it doesn't, it could be quite hard to read. For the donation widget itself, the dollar handles really should be no more than 2 lines to avoid the widget being too long. And once a donor has selected an amount, check that the form is easy to fill out on a small screen. If donors have to pinch and zoom or your form fields don't work properly on mobile, you definitely run the risk of losing them. So moving into our final section, which is all around the frictionless checkout. This is really the critical bridge between a donor's intent and their action. So at this time of year, I think it's safe to assume that your donors are likely supporting multiple efforts. So if your donation flow feels like work, there's a risk they move on. And another way to think about it is, why invest heavily in ads if your checkout is full of leaks? So to show you what a best practice checkout actually looks like, we wanted to highlight a few of our customers who are using our integrated tools and payment processor on their NationBuilder websites to turn more clicks into contributions. But before diving into some of those campaign examples, we wanted to share a couple of stats, namely that the charity sector's checkout conversion rates, a lot of C's there, pale in comparison to the usual e-commerce standards. So we're talking about a 20% checkout conversion versus a typical 40 to 60% for e-commerce services. You really shouldn't settle for 20% just because you're a nonprofit, right? Your donors are the same people who shop on Amazon and use Uber. They shouldn't lower their expectations when it comes to their user experience just because they're doing something good. And in fact, you should make it easier to give to a nonprofit or an advocacy movement than it is to buy a pair of shoes. So like we've mentioned already, Meta or social traffic will usually end up here on a mobile donation page. While on desktop, you have room to build trust and provide all the context that you deem necessary. The mobile experience is slightly different because you are quite literally in a race against a distraction event, whether that's a notification, a phone call, or quite literally the donor arriving at their bus stop and they need to put their phone away for a bit. Time is of the essence here, so you want to make sure that your flow is as efficient as possible. So to start off with, you'll want to make sure express payment options are available, whether that's Google or Apple Pay, where donors are able to make a donation in one click of a button. And we'll soon be releasing Link as an additional express payment method too. So not only are you diversifying and facilitating the ways in which donors can support your work, but you are meeting them where they're at in their journey with your movement. The second one might seem like a no-brainer, but easy thumb navigation is key. So making sure that your donation options and buttons are large and tappable. If your donors are wanting to select an amount that's different to the ones displayed, making sure this triggers the numeric keypad immediately is really key, because if a donor has to switch from the alphabetical keyboard to numbers, that's a micro friction point that's really easy to avoid in the first place. Finally, when filling out donation forms, it's not uncommon for folks to get a bit of anxiety. So telling donors exactly how close they are to the finish line is important so that they don't feel like they're entering just another bottomless pit of data entry. So on the other hand, desktop flows have more real estate than mobiles, but that's a double-edged sword. More space often leads to more distractions. So your goal here is to use that space to build trust, impact, and speed all at once. So I wanted us to look at 3 distinct user journeys some of our customers have created on NationBuilder. And first up, we have the guided step model, like we see with the Aboriginal Legal Service, which is the example in orange. So on desktop, this is all about cognitive load. So by breaking the donation into amount, details, payment, the donor never feels overwhelmed. And you can notice that there's a progress tracker at the top. That's sort of a psychological green light that tells the donor that this is just a 60-second task. It's not going to be a 10-minute project. So if your end of financial year appeal has a lot of moving parts, you might want to use steps to keep the interface clean and the donor focused on just one decision at a time. Next is a personal favorite for desktop, which is the side-by-side layout used by Friends of the Earth Australia. This is where desktop really shines. So on the left, you have your emotional anchor, the case for support, like we've already mentioned. And on the right, you have the action center, which is the form itself. The secret sauce here is the quote sticky column. So as the donor reads the powerful story, the donation form stays fixed in their line of sight. They're emotionally primed. You're answering the why and the how in one single viewpoint. And finally, we have the minimalist static form from Hepatitis Australia in the top right. This is the Formula One of donation pages, very much built for pure speed. So the donor is in the form the moment the page loads. There are no next buttons or any accordions. It's very straightforward, very transparent. But if you look closer at the field reduction, they've stripped away everything that isn't legally required for a tax receipt. So you're not asking for any titles, no middle names, no unnecessary fields that essentially create friction. And so when looking at these 3 desktop examples, the common thread is respecting the donor's focus. On a desktop, we have more room, but that also means more room for distraction. So your goal is to keep the donor in the giving zone by answering their questions and removing their hurdles before they even think to click away. And I will pass back to Jack to wrap us out.
Thanks, Maddie. I appreciate we've definitely thrown a bit of information your way in the last 30 or so minutes. So we wanted to do our best to sum all of that up. So you've got some really key takeaways for your own end of financial year appeal. So the first thing is to simplify your meta campaign structures. Or if you're working with an agency, talk to your agency and ask, how are the campaigns set up? What does the structure look like and why? And make sure that your campaigns are optimizing for conversions. That old model of, that waterfall funnel isn't as effective anymore. The second is target with creative. So if you've got that big, broad, cold audience, your simplified campaign structure, you still want to be talking to different pockets of people, and you're going to reach them with different angles and hooks. Also, make sure you are, as best as you can, integrating across channels and ensure your teams are creative aligned. So if possible, also avoid putting all of your eggs in the meta basket. So for example, if you're running currently paid search and meta, and you've got over, let's just say, $30,000 in media budget, you should really be looking at exploring some additional channels. Sometimes we would do it with less than that too. And it can just, like with our commercial client, $5,000 could be a viable enough test. Number 4, test lo-fi digital creative. It's fast, it's super cost effective. Probably anyone in your team could do it, and it really does drive results. So yeah, don't throw everything, all the nice branded stuff you've got out, but definitely test this against that. Number 5, people give to people. So where you can, try and showcase impact in your ads with content featuring service users and staff. So the example from the recross that we shared with the team member on the ground, or the direct ask example from Havens Hospices. Number 6, ads get the clicks, landing pages drive conversions. Make sure your page follows best practice. We will share a recording of this and also our blog after this, which details all of those in written form. So you'll get that tomorrow. Number 7, you must make it really easy to give. So definitely go and review your checkout and see how you can make it more frictionless. You might not have time to go and adopt an entire new platform before end of financial year, but you might be able to remove a few fields or put in as progress counters like Maddie suggested. And lastly, do you really need their title? Are there any form fields you can remove from any point in that checkout journey? I do know of some organizations who have a higher lifetime value when they include, they get the donors' post details, but I do think it's really important that you test removing it and see what the difference is.
Well, there you have it. Tips you can use and implement as early as tomorrow as your end of financial year approaches. Thanks for joining us today. If this workshop was helpful to you, please like and subscribe for more content like this. And if you would like the full blog recap, check out the link in our caption below. We'll see you next time.